Well, thank you very much, Corey, for having me on the program. I think, of those three facts that you just outlined, I think one of the most interesting one was the fact that there were 200,000 additional people on welfare, but just recently, so during the course of the pandemic, and they remain on the welfare roll. Now, your point is a strong one, that there are people on the unemployment role, the long term, the ones who've been on for quite some time, who are probably very difficult to employ. But these are recent entrants to the out of work category. And I think it's a very interesting issue about why they haven't resumed their jobs in the workforce, because, as you say, there are absolutely widespread labour shortages and there are job vacancies all around the place. And it's not just in regional areas, as you know, it's actually in the cities, in the suburbs and in the regions.
Yeah, Judith, it's a huge issue right across the country, and I accept the fact that agricultural workers or seasonal workers, work is not even attractive to a lot of people, and we have to pick the fruit, we have to harvest the crops. But when you walk through a city and you see people looking for staff to come and work in their stores, or hospitality staff, or people to do, some of these most basic roles, how can we have a 10% youth unemployment rate? Why do we need to have students, imported students, doing additional work because our young people won't do it? That's what concerns me. What sort of culture are we raising here?
Well, I mentioned in my column the overseas research, which I think is equally applicable here. And that is, if you import workers who are prepared to do low-skilled jobs, what tends to happen is that the locals will vacate those jobs. And actually, even over time, it is very difficult to attract the locals back into those jobs. So arguably, this is a potential one-way street. Now, one thing that concerns me a great deal about the international students, or two things in particular concern me about the international students and their working rights, is that Alex Hawke, who is the Immigration Minister, recently made the extraordinary change to the regulations whereby international students are not subject to any restricted work rights. So they can work as many hours as they want in the course of a week. Now, it seems to me that these international students are either here for education or principally to work. I don't think the idea that international students should be given a completely free rein to work as many hours as they want to in the labour market is consistent with their idea of having being provided with a quality education and working hard to do well in it. So I think that's something that is a considerable concern. The other point is that if you look at the evidence on what you might, the Labor Party calls wage theft, I mean, I think there is quite a lot of inadvertent non-compliance with our labour market regulations because they're so damn complex. But let us, for the sake of argument, say that there is some chronic underpayment of wages. You'll find that the migrant workers are disproportionately represented in that group. And it's very hard, I think, to track it down, right? Because, indeed, often the international students will work for business owners who are of their same ethnic group. And so there's this kind of, dare I say, a slight conspiracy goes on that no one's dobbing in the bad behaviour. So I think that is of concern.
Isn't one of the problems, Judith, that governments have been reliant on an immigration program to prop up the economy? They want to go back to that again, and students, in particular overseas students, is a backdoor way of getting residency, then becoming citizens. They stay here, and it's attractive because they've got these work rights. What should the government be doing to make Australia more sustainable and less reliant on these international workers? Is it a carrot and a stick approach, or do we have to think more radically than that?
I think there are various ideas you can think about. It's interesting to look at the data. So the Chinese students actually look quite different from students from the other countries, which include India, Nepal, Brazil, Vietnam. So the Chinese students will stay for a while, but often go home. Whereas the students from those other countries basically come, they work, and then they seek permanent residence. So I think in terms of the arguments, it's worth looking at the facts to start off with. I mean, I'd be very inclined for the government to enter into an arrangement with universities which seeks to limit the number of international students that any institution can enrol in. Now, there are obviously complications of doing that, but I say that partly because I think the local students have ended up getting a bit of a rotten deal, because there are some courses where international students, often with poor language skills, are actually a dominant group. So I think, you know, we can believe in immigration, and to a degree I believe in immigration, certainly permanent immigration, and we can also believe in the value of international students. But that doesn't mean it should be basically open slather. I think it has to be tightly regulated, both in terms of quality and quantity.
Exactly right. It's got to work in our economic, our social and our cultural interests, and it shouldn't be used to just mask the problems that are inherent in our economy. Judith, Sloan, thank you for your insights tonight. I really appreciate it, and a great column today.